Apologize for being just a few minutes late today. Had some things to accomplish, some really great releases on Outside of Music. Ended up having some great placements on some playlists, and so we wanted to make sure we got that info out. So it was running a couple minutes behind, but thanks for being here. Thanks for joining. There's a couple things I want to talk about today. In addition to our great questions that I know will come in, either in the chat here on Instagram, the chat on Facebook, the comments in YouTube and Twitch. I'll see them all right here, so feel free to drop those in as we go. But two kind of topics. What's up, Jack? What's up, Sky Pilot? What's up, Dylan? Two things I want to talk about today. One is the last chance for pre-orders on the Rhythm Changes course. I dropped a Rhythm Changes course in pre-order this week, full launch next week on the 29th, Monday, but the pre-orders are open. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, you can find the link to grab that. What's up, Matthew Golombisky? How you doing, man? What's up, Etha? Hope all is well down in South America. Down in Argentina. We're going to talk about the Rhythm Changes course. Maybe we'll play a little bit of Rhythm Changes today if we have time. And the other thing I want to talk about is production and how to think about producing an album, how to take on that production role, and just some thoughts in terms of managing that process and what it looks like, because one of our groups at school is going into the studio this weekend, the YouTubes, the UNT, our jazz trombone ensemble. The YouTubes were going into the studio on Saturday, which is tomorrow. And I've been preparing along with our TF and kind of guiding him through this process. And I thought, it's not as obvious maybe as I think, I guess, because I don't know. It's just not as obvious as maybe it was to me and is to me after going through the process a few times. So I want to talk about those two things, but I want to take a second to say hello to some more people that are joining here. What's up, Colin, Dominic, Richard? Thanks for joining in. Thanks for dropping by. Feel free, as always, to drop questions in anytime throughout the Q&A here. But otherwise, we're gonna kind of get rolling, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about this production process and kind of taking on this role. So the first thing I think about when I'm producing a record, or thinking about hiring a producer, the type of things that they're gonna take care of on a session, is just kind of managing the flow of the day, number one, and being that set of trusted ears. So things that you want to make sure that you have for the day when you get a producer you want to collaborate on with them is have them have a full understanding of what the scope of the project is, what the desired outcomes are of the project, what you want the project to be like at the end, and then kind of working backwards from there, because you got to define kind of what your metrics are, what your goals are. Is it okay not to finish in a day? Do you need that person to be running the schedule? So a couple of things that I like to do is make spreadsheets. I know it's not very exciting, but I'll hold up, kind of what I do. So this is just like an example spreadsheet that I've printed out, and it's just a schedule of basically hour by hour. We're doing 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. So what time to show up, when we're going to be sound checking, who's going to be sound checking when, and really taking a deep dive into like really just that logistics in the schedule. Because if you fail to plan, it's really easy to get off schedule with your day. I mean, there's certain people that are able to just schedule time in the studio, go into the studio and just like let creativity flow. But sometimes you have to be a little bit more organized. So I just think for me, when you have limited time and a lot of moving parts, we do have some COVID regulations. A certain number of people can be in the studio at a time, so we can't record everybody at the same time, which is makes things take a little bit longer, right? Because you got to do every tune twice. So that's what I do. I block it out hour to hour. You can't probably read what this says, but you can see hour to hour what tunes are going to be played, what tunes to be recorded. And then on a separate tab on that sheet, I like to chart out all the events that are happening on each tune. And not only do I have this list of events that's happening on each tune, so I know what's coming up. I can tell the engineer which channels are going to have solos. I can tell people what's going on. I can say, okay, this person's going to solo, so the engineer can pay attention to that. They can adjust levels accordingly. Having all those things is scores. So especially when you have a large ensemble, it's important for your producer to have the score, because the producer can go ahead and start marking in rehearsal letters. They can be guiding. Well, since this is what happens all the time, you get into these situations where people go like, we got to go back like 30 seconds. Oh, no, that's too far. Oh, no, that's not enough. That's too far. Oh, wait, go forward like 10 seconds. No, go back 10 seconds. And you're trying to find a punch. But if you have the score, then we can go to an exact bar number, even if you're not using a click. So I tend not to use click when recording. Tend not to use a click just because I think it's, if I do use a click, I try to use like a big beat click, like maybe one every other beat, like 1 and 3, or even just on 1, just to keep the band together. Depending on the comfort level of the players with a click, but it's generally better not to bother using a click at all for that organic feel if you want it to kind of shift around. And this is acoustic jazz music, so that's kind of what the vibe is. So get the scores, and then I learned this trick. Who did I learn it from? Maybe John Fetchock did it, or Ryan Truesdell, or who? I forget exactly who was doing it, but just like taking 2 different color pens, basically, and first take, mark all the mistakes in one color. Second take, mark all the mistakes in a second color. Pick which one has like the better vibe, and then make the appropriate fixes from there. Especially because we're gonna have to lay down the rhythm tracks first, and then the trombones. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take a full take. If it's really good, then we'll just make the fixes that are necessary. If it's not good, we'll do another one, and then make the fixes as necessary. Just take those 2 different color pens, and then as you circle and highlight the different parts that are good or bad, it makes it really easy to go back. So those are some things about producing a session that I think go maybe unnoticed, and it's just those little things, those little planning items. And then, of course, on the day, it's your job to, make sure that the number one, the musicians trust you, and they trust your opinion, judgment, and trust your ability to make calls on the fly, because you don't know, as an artist, sometimes you don't know what's good and what's not good while you're playing. I mean, you obviously know what sounds are good and how you want to represent yourself, but you got to get somebody in that control room that's going to be able to go ahead and like make those calls for you. So that's an important aspect of production, and just kind of making things go smoothly. So that's number one, why I have a schedule, why I pre-plan breaks, why I pre-plan extra time into the end of the day. Like I always put an hour at the end of the day. We got to be done an hour early, so that if we have extra stuff to fix, if we've got to back up files, if we've got to move files, whatever it is that we have to do, we need to be able to allot time for those activities. So I always have extra time booked into the end of the day for that stuff, at least a half an hour, if not a full hour, to do all that kind of stuff. So as you go forward and you start thinking about your projects and bringing on a producer, you not only want artistic feedback from that person, but you also want that person to be able to answer questions, manage the band, get people where they need to be. In a big band session, sometimes it's like herding cats, get them back into the studio, get the next take. Everybody's trying to go to the bathroom. When you're trying to do a take, you got to be on top of it. And the more of on a schedule you can be, the more it's easy to let the session just flow. So the best sessions are easy. The musicians show up and play. They don't even have to deal with any of the details. So, the last thing I want to say about the production process, and feel free to drop in questions about that, or I'll move over to starting to talk about rhythm changes until we get some questions, is the last thing I'll say is just that you have to have a good idea of what you want it to sound like going in. You have to be able to tell the engineer when something's not right. So this happens sometimes with bass, for example, is a big one. Sometimes the engineer might not know what an acoustic jazz bass sound should sound like. And you might have to be able to, one, show them an example quickly, and 2, guide them a little bit in terms of like the sound and how it is, and can you tighten it up? Can you add some compression to the mid-range or the low range or the high range, because it's like kind of blowing out a little bit. So you have to know a little bit about that kind of thing. I wouldn't say that every producer has to have the level of engineering that's necessary. They just have to be able to articulate in words the sound that they're trying to look for. So knowing what a trombone, and for this session, I got to know what the trombones sound like, all the different people. How can I capture their sounds and guide the engineer to capture their sound best? Sometimes that's with a microphone choice. Sometimes it's with placement. Sometimes it's with tweaking the EQ. All those different kinds of things. So that's what a producer does. That's why you should have a good producer at a session. That's why they're worth every cent that you pay them, or every amount of favors that you do in return for them in the future, or whatever that might be. So I hope you'll consider, doing that into the future. And it's something I enjoy doing, and I've gotten more into over the years. It's really nice to be able to help somebody else to realize their artistic vision, and then to be able to entrust somebody else with yours in the future after that. So if you've never thought about it before, that's kind of what a producer does. There's a whole episode that I did with Ryan Truesdell, who's a great producer, Grammy-winning producer, with Maria Schneider this year. And so anyway, that's the production process. And what's up, Wayne? How are you, man? Miss you. It's been a long time. That's kind of the production process in terms of like an acoustic jazz recording session vibe, not production like making beats or tracks or mixing, anything like that, but just kind of that in-person production person that's going to help you get the acoustic session happening. So, all right, I see some questions coming in now. So I'll turn to those before we turn to talking about rhythm changes. But the first question in was from Jens Blades Music. He says, how do you transcribe chord progressions, and what is your process to transcribing? It's a good question, and it's pretty similar to this other question we have from YouTube, from Richard. Let's see if we can kind of combine these together or flow smoothly from one into the next. Okay, transcribing chord progressions, the best way to do that is on the piano. But I wasn't always able to do so. So I had a system, and it was a very slow system, but over time it got faster and faster and faster. So the system was, hear the bass note, hear if the chord is major or minor, hear if the seventh is major or minor, and then from there deduce the possibilities of what's possible. Because if you have a major third and a major seven, it's probably a major seven. There's other times where it might be more extensions than that, or maybe it's a C, maybe it's a sixth chord or something like that. But I try to get those three things, I suppose, which is function, bass note, and quality. And so if you can get those three things just by focusing on, okay, what's the third, what's the seventh, after you figure out what the root is, you can have a pretty solid understanding, a pretty solid kind of roadmap for what all the chords are. And then if you know, like if it's a show tune, for example, or a Broadway tune, that's probably going to be like 2-5-1. Use your knowledge to try to help fill in the gaps. Use the melody. So if you can use the melody, and then you think, oh wait, so what is the note in bar 5? And if you see that it's let's say the chord is G7 and the melody note is A, and you're like, oh, it's a natural 9. Or if you go and say like it's a G7 and the note is E, you're like, oh, it's a 13. It must be like a G13, or maybe it's a G6, because you can kind of figure it out and deduce it from those kind of breadcrumbs that the composer and the improvisers leave along the way. So for chord progression transcription, at the beginning, that's what I would do. Write down on a scratch piece of paper, just a random piece of paper, just write it down, not staff paper, just write down, sketch out the form, write the root notes, and then say, okay, is this one major or minor? Is this one major or minor? Is this one major or minor? And so sometimes that means just like playing it, pausing, and hitting on the piano like, okay, I know the root is C, so I'll play it, and then I stop and I hit E, and I say, oh, okay, that wasn't it. It's not major. So I play it and stop and I hit E flat. Okay, killing. It must be minor. Is that going to give you the full story? Because no, of course, if you have an E flat and an E, then it'll be a dominant chord with a sharp 9, but you get the idea. So one chord tone at a time. And so it takes a long time. You gotta go slow, but you got to start sometime. And so for me, it's like start as soon as you can, because as soon as you can makes the process faster in the long run. And like I said, what I've said many times on the channel before, and I've said many times in master classes and to my students all the time, as soon as I threw away my real book and had to start relying on my ears all the time and transcribing every tune I knew. What's up, Rob Edwards? What's up, Alton? What's up? All the trombonists are coming on today. What's happening? Luke's still all the trombonists. Luke. What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining. So anyway, yeah, as soon as you can jump in, get rid of the real books, learn tunes by ear, and try to just do that. So that's how I started transcribing by ear. Now that I have more piano skills, I can kind of transcribe maybe most of that at the same time, like a series of chords, 2-5-1 or whatever. So that's something. Sometimes you have to look though, because sometimes like you don't know what the composer was doing. You need to go and get the lead sheet from the composer, or like there's a lot of possibilities. So sometimes you just write down like what all the possibilities are. But I've talked about this with some students as well. I got this from my improv class at Juilliard with Ben Wolf. He used to talk about all the time. There is no such thing as the changes, only the changes that are being played right now. And maybe that's a little bit esoteric, but it's true, because it's like you kind of really need to memorize like what the function is of the chord progression, or like the big picture, like where are we going, what key centers are we going through, because the specific qualities of a chord could change over time. Or like this is the perfect example. We were working on this semester Web City. So what I was going to say is like it's like the telephone game, and with this tune, Web City, if you listen to various versions, like you go back to the beginning, it's a Bud Powell tune. So if you go back to like Bud Powell playing with Fats Navarro, it's played one way, right? And then kind of over time, it morphed into playing all of these different kind of ways with different changes. And if you even go so far as to say there's an Art Blakey Jazz Messengers version with Bobby Watson and Wynton Marsalis, where they don't play the bridge. So they don't play the bridge melody there, and they don't play the right changes, quote unquote, the right changes, but they just turn it into a rhythm changes. Whereas if you listen to the original, it's a little bit different. It goes 2-5 to 4, and then 2 dominant, 5 dominant. But it's really interesting, like this telephone game of like the oral tradition of it, stuff being passed along. It's when you investigate certain tunes, you can hear it straight away. So when I have students learn tunes, like I try to tell them, like certain tunes, it's like you just learn it, like Giant Steps, for example. You just kind of have to know, you just kind of have to learn it. But when we're learning songbook tunes, it's like, yeah, you got to kind of have different versions. And like, here's a few different ways of doing this, or a few ways of thinking about it. But ultimately, it's about being able to hear and react and play together with the band and with everyone there. So maybe, hopefully that answered your question. What's up, Josh? Thanks everyone for joining. It's Friday, March 26th, if you're just joining us. You're watching in the future replay of this live stream, but have some great trombonists watching. In and out I see today, so hello Alton. Richard, we sort of answered this, but so that was the process kind of for learning new tunes. But in terms of internalizing the changes, I think that to internalizing the changes is kind of along the same lines. If you get rid of the sheet music, you get rid of the memorization process, because you're just learning it. Just like you learn a language, just like you learn words, just like you learn a concept. If you just learn it from the recording, play it along with the recording, then you just learned it, and you don't have to write it down, and you don't have to memorize it because you just learned it. So for me, this comes at just trying to be efficient. It's efficiency in that you learn it directly. There's no memorization. You can learn it on piano and trombone at the same time. So much of jazz music, learning jazz music, playing jazz music for that matter, is mental. Playing trombone for that matter, it's just a mental game of knowing what you're supposed to be doing and really being able to kind of plan ahead, know where you're going, have this big picture awareness of things and how harmony relates to the tune. And so to internalize, that's what I do. I learn it right from a record. I don't memorize it. If I have to memorize it from a sheet of paper, it takes so long. So even if somebody gives me the music, it's probably faster for me to memorize if I just learn it without the music, this is coming from a person that totally came up through the, regular old Western musical system of like learning to read music and all of that, it's all, this is just, oh wait, this other way is faster, and you learn it more deeply by not relying on sheet music. Sometimes you need to make a cheat sheet or something like that because you don't have time. There's so many tunes and you can't learn them all fast enough. And yeah, like real life is real life, and like real situations, you have to do what you have to do. But in an ideal world, and it's also important to remember like that you can't necessarily memorize or internalize something in a day. It takes multiple days. I think there's probably something written about this somewhere, and I haven't been able to find where I read it first, but like there is a kind of a strange phenomenon of if you like read about or learn stuff like right before you go to bed and then you go to bed, like it helps stay in your brain better. I'm sure someone, maybe Kevin, knows a little bit more about that than I do. but Kevin Hornbuckle, that is, or even any other my psychologist friends know a little bit more about that learning process. But yeah, it's super interesting. So if you practice right before you go to bed, something you're trying to memorize, I've noticed that I tend to remember it better. So there's I don't know if that's a trick or a hack or just part of human experience, that if you do that, it can be helpful. I don't know. It's worth exploring, especially if you're having trouble internalizing things or having trouble memorizing things. And I'll be the first to admit that, certain tunes, certain things, they have gotten away from me in a way, over and over and over again. I'll start something and go away from it. Start something, I've forgotten Moment's Notice so many times. I have to relearn that one frequently. And not anymore, but for the longest time, probably from grad school till a few years ago, it was just every time somebody wanted to play it, I was like, oh man, I got to relearn this again. And that's how it goes. But anyway, that's how I learn a tune, and that's how I internalize the tune. Just go straight to that internalization. So Richard, I hope that helps. I'm going to go back over here to Instagram while people are dropping in other questions. Kevin had a question here about rhythm changes, so we'll kind of go to that. He says, with rhythm changes, how do you balance clearly playing the changes with feeling like you have to play over every single chord? Well, the important thing is that you hit the important notes that define the harmony in the big picture. So what I mean by that is, if you play 1-6-2-5, 3-6-2-5, if you play it one time and define it, then the next time you don't have to necessarily play it the same way, you don't have to do it the same all the time. You can go ahead and play maybe the larger picture key centers. That's what I like to do. What's up, Lenoir? What's up, Sachin? Thanks for joining us. Talking about rhythm changes and not having to play every single chord. So that's the bigger picture, is that you have to be both very specific to each change in the micro and know the function in the macro. So in one sense, you can just be skating over the changes by just playing the major key center. But if I'm playing in B flat, but really if I play F7, over that section, B flat, F7, B flat, F7, I can kind of get away with just playing one sound. Let me get my trombone here. So if you go ahead and think maybe about so if I play every change, right, so I'm thinking about playing every single change. But if I maybe switch my mental concept and say, all right, I'm going to play the bigger function of the whole section, which is B flat, and it goes to 4, and then it's 2-5 back to the top of the A section again. Sorry, first notes of the day, so a little unclear, but I'm thinking of one thing and then the other. So it's big picture, micro, macro, micro, macro, micro, macro, going back and forth between those couple of things and trying to make that balance. And then on the bridge, you can play longer sounds, right? Right, you can play two chords, or one sound for two chords, two bars. So you stretch it out. So that's what I like to do, or I like to kind of improvise based on the melody, which is something that is basically kind of what's the framing for the course that I launched this last week. Well, it will be launched next week, but yes. Hi, Alexander. Feel free to drop in a question, man. so the course is really like going through tunes, right? So we play, different melodies that, kind of make you improvise in a different way. If you play like Duke Ellington's Cottontail, that's going to come across one way. You might want to improvise one way, like kind of a simple way, like, right, kind of thinking about that riffy kind of melody. And then from there, you would want to maybe say, okay, well, what if we're playing a bebop tune? You want to play a little bit different. Right? So there's kind of like different vibes, different type of like vocabulary, rhythmic vocabulary, and it's all kind of coming from the melody. So that's what I like to do. So that in that course, we go through 8 tunes, talking about all different, like kind of starting with like a jazz blues, and then we kind of break it down further. So if you want to check that out, you can either go to the link in my Instagram bio if you're on Instagram, or it should be linked on YouTube and Facebook, but it's Nick Finzer Virtual Studio Rhythm Changes Series 1. So that's one. Anyway, so there's lots of different ways to think about it, but that's kind of where I'm coming from, is like there's these different approaches, kind of like a pentatonic-y approach, like Lester Leaps In or something like that, like a simpler approach, and then there's like a bebop approach, or then there's even like, playing like a tune like, we don't do this in the course, but Elliot Mason has a great tune called Julio. It's got a more open feel. It has more augmented chords. You can play more different kinds of vocabulary, but it's all kind of contextual. Like you have to play a tune and improvise on the tune in a way, at least to me, that's similar enough to the melody so it sounds like one song. It doesn't sound like you're improvising on a different song than what you played the melody of, right? So that's just something that I think of. But those are, a couple examples. Hope that helps. I see your question, Alexander. We'll get there in just a sec. Make sure we kind of got to Kevin's question. So Kevin, I hope that helps. Yeah, think about the tune. That's what I think about. And think about how you would play on different tunes and how it relates to the melody. Like rhythming is going to be something you can play differently on than anthropology. It's just the nature of jazz vocabulary. It's the nature of all of that stuff. So what's up, Rob Edwards? I think I saw Rob is taking students at New Jersey City University as well. If you don't know Rob, check him out. Killing trombonist in New York. And I guess we weren't at Juilliard at the same time, but played many a gig together in the city. All right, so Alexander says, when looking at the guitar/bass type of instrument, we have repeating patterns, so it is much easier to learn intervals and apply them across keys and such. Any suggestions on applying this to the trombone? Is it just perseverance and time, or are there some trends I may have been missing? So Alexander, let me see if I can figure out what you're asking. So you're talking about the visual of it. There are patterns on the trombone. They just go along with the partial series. So, this, not the first partial, but this partial, the low B flat, is a fourth away from the next. Sorry, it's a fifth away from the next, which is a fourth away, which is then a third away, which is so a major third and then a minor third. And then you have kind of a fake one in between, and then another fourth. So just like you would think about the distance between tuning, the notes tuned on a guitar is the same with the trombone. And there's a guy named, why am I forgetting his name? He was a guest at the trombone day at UNT. He has this thing called the trombone visualizer. Kevin Hicks, trombone visualizer. That he kind of lays it out just like you might lay out the fretboard on or lay out looking at a fretboard, and he kind of puts things out, or puts them onto this grid kind of in the same way as a guitar. So that might be helpful to you if you're really visual in that way. But everything is just down chromatically, and then it goes on to this kind of giant grid of the positions. And the positions are, you can play fourths. That's all perfect fourths, or you can play the whole overtone series, which like in a key center is like 1 5 1 3 5. I'm not going to sing it. 1, the high 1 in a key. So once you learn those two things, you can pretty much find any note, just as if you were on like a guitar or something. So Alexander, that's where I would send you if you need a visualization. Otherwise, it's just learning the intervals and learning the notes. I would recommend using your ears to think about intervals, not visualize, because you don't play with your eyes, you play with your ears. So, somebody said, you got this. We got it. Thanks, N. Drew B. Taylor, what does he say? He says, I have my junior recital tonight. Any advice on performance mindset? Yeah, man. Enjoy, first of all. Enjoy the recital. The thing to remember is that eventually you realize and experience that pretty much every gig is the same. Whether it's the largest gig or the smallest gig, it's the same. And whether there's one person in the audience or 10,000, it's pretty much the same, depending on how much you give in to the situation, meaning like how much do you worry about the audience. So for example, when you play in front of your peers, it's a lot more nerve-wracking potentially for me than it is to just play in front of a bunch of people, right? Because you don't know who's in the audience, you don't know if they know about music, if they care about trombone, etc. But if I play for at the ITF this summer, the International Trombone Festival, I'm going to have a lot more pressure personally on myself because of, everybody knows what's happening. They know about the instrument. They want to do the similar things that I want to do and all of that. So it feels different. But at the end of the day, if you're enjoying playing the music, you're going to have a more positive experience than you worry about making a mistake. So I always like to say, whether we're trying to change something technique-wise or we're trying to play music and focus on the music, focus on the outcome, not on the thing that might happen or not on the negative thing. If somebody's trying to someone's having a problem with articulation or flexibility or something, they go what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? And they focus on that a lot. And I tend to send people the other way and said, okay, well, what do we want it to feel like? We want it to be like this. So focus on that. Focus on playing with that good sound, having that good sound concept, articulating this way. Focus on how that music is going to sound. So it's if you make a nice artistic statement and you crack a note, that's 100 times better than being a robot and executing perfectly, but sounding totally flat. It's not interesting. It's wow, that was technically sound. Nobody cares. I mean, for me, I don't care about that. And so, then there's plenty of artists that kind of execute in that way, that they're really focused on technical mastery, and it's cool. It's great, but that's only part of it, So try to enjoy the music making, and don't worry about it. It's just one day. It's just one gig of thousands of gigs, thousands of performances, whether they're school performances, internet performances, back in person performances. They're all kind of the same, You just have to kind of let it go. It's hard. It can be hard, but you just kind of have to let go and let the preparation kind of speak for itself, So hope that helps. All right. So feel free to drop in any questions as we go here. But while we have a slight pause, I'm going to kind of just talk a little bit more, go back to some of this rhythm changes stuff and talk a little bit about, maybe some ideas that you can use to help practice rhythm changes on your own, other than just focusing on the tune stuff, which I think is important. And I think, at least for me, has yielded success in terms of learning how to improvise in different ways and different approaches on tunes. But kind of the thing that I like to do is really use limitation in practicing and limitation in teaching as well, like as a teaching tool. So what I like to do is kind of just eliminate one or more choices, mostly more, but and say something like, okay, we're going to, focus on just walking a bass line, which essentially is just playing quarter notes, right? So if you just say, okay, I'm going to practice playing quarter notes through this whole form, or am I going to just play whatever I want? No, I'm going to limit myself. I'm going to play just quarter notes, and it's going to sound like a bass line. So maybe something like this. And if I play that enough times, then I'm going to get bored. And it'll force me to try something else. Like, maybe as the second A being like a little bit more longitudinal in my approach, or kind of playing down like the full range of the horn rather than sticking and playing. Kind of just like root third, root third, root third, root third. And obviously, sometimes you need to do that first. You need to, play the basics first. Root 3, root 7th, all these kind of things. Play the arpeggios, but really it's a balance of all that stuff. So I like to use that limitation. So if you've never walked a bass line through the rhythm changes, that's a really good place to start as a challenge, because it's real time. You don't get to stop. You play constant quarter notes. And then if you can do that pretty easily, then you can say, okay, now I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to do eighth notes, and I'm going to play eighth notes all the way through. So you got to find different ways. Is it bebop language eighth notes, or is it going to be scalar eighth notes, or is it going to be diminished scale eighth notes, and where do I put those? And there's a lot of levels, but that's the best practice tool. People say, students sometimes say like, oh, how do you practice jazz? Or like, how do you get better at practicing jazz and having like ideas? And it's this idea, it's limitations. You're practicing coming up with stuff on your own, because that's what we're doing all the time. We're improvising, right? So that's what you have to practice doing, is limiting yourself. Can I do this? Can I only do this? Can I only use this one tool? And yeah, let boredom motivate you to creative variations. That's a beautiful way to put it. Exactly. So questions coming in, so we'll jump here. Do you have a warm-up practice routine, or does it change daily depending on time, energy level, upcoming gigs? Yeah, I mean, there's a routine. I have a routine if I can do it. I don't usually get to do it. It involves a lot. It involves basically trying to hit as many of things as possible in as short of time as possible. I wasted a lot of time in undergrad having too long of a warm-up, because I thought I needed a too long warm-up. But I need to hit sound, I need to hit flexibility in terms of like lip flexibility, and I need to hit articulation as like the major things. And so I, over the years, have come up with different ways of doing that. And so for me right now, that results in focusing a lot on pitch bends, using the lower register, the pedal register, and wide intervals, because that gets me warmed up the fastest and helps me to articulate the musical ideas that I'm trying to get to in my playing around this time. So it's going to change, obviously, and based on the things you said, the time of day, or the time I have, the gigs that are coming up, what do I need to be able to do? I think about flexibility as a concept rather than like, oh, it's lip slurs. Flexibility is a concept to be able to play what you need to play when you need to play it. That's how I think about it. So it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do everything or do everything in a warm-up session, but that flexibility is that you can access, those different skills: high range, low range, fast articulation, slow articulation. That's what flexibility is to me. So that warm-up routine is that. It's pitch bends, it's false tones, it's the lower register, the pedal register, it's using different kinds of wide interval flexibilities at this point to inform what I'm going to play. So yeah, it has a lot to do with that, for sure. Okay. Hope that answers your question, N. All right, so we'll open that up for a few more questions. I'm going to put this here so people know we're doing a Q&A on Instagram here. Yesterday I posted something, and so the questions are still there from yesterday's F rhythm changes. So while we're waiting for a few more questions to kind of join us, maybe I'll play a little bit. Maybe I'll play a different rhythm changes key. Let's see, maybe A flat. Oh man, okay, I see more questions. So I just like to, for me, just even challenge myself with playing different keys, going through. I know in that course we did a 12 key challenge, just playing straight through bass lines in 12 keys. So that was hard, but a really good exercise. And so got to have a little bit of knowledge of like what are the different options, like what are the ways you can navigate the changes. All right. So here's a totally different question. Let me do this one first because I've never seen a question like this. My brother may have a haunted Native American bone. Do you think horns can be a curse? And if so, is it a good or bad thing? I have no idea, man. I don't necessarily believe in that. A horn be cursed? I guess it could be. If you believe it, then yes. Definitely if you believe it, it can be true, because whatever you believe to be true is obviously true. So, do what you need to do. But I don't know. I guess it could be, but I wouldn't spend too much time thinking about that. Thanks, Dr. B. Appreciate you being here. All right, J. Bob, what do you listen for when listening to freshman auditions at UNT? That's a good question. Are there any students from Sweden? I don't know right now if there's any students from Sweden. I haven't gotten any applications, but we would be happy to have some. So feel free to send them our way. I don't know if there's any Swedish. I don't think so. We have some other countries represented, more South American countries than anything else at the moment. But it always changes. We had a couple students from Southeast Asia, but they graduated. But yeah, feel free. Okay, where did the question go? Okay, what do you listen for when listening to freshman auditions at UNT? So, a couple things. The primary thing that I listen for is does that person actually want to get a jazz degree? You'd be surprised that could eliminate a lot of people, and because they might have a different definition of like what jazz means. So if you don't want to play standards, if you don't want to learn the history, if you don't want to know about Duke Ellington and know about J.J. Johnson and study their music and learn about Slide Hampton and these type of people, like that person and me are probably not a good fit, because I'm going to keep telling you to go to these things and you're going to keep pushing back against it. Maybe that's a good thing for you. I mean, I think it would be a good thing for you to have that informed history. Whether or not you're going to be like a trombone soloist or like want to play in that style is irrelevant. Like as a practitioner, teacher of the instrument, it's important to have at least some context. That's what I always say is like, you got to be coming from an informed position. I don't care what kind of music you play or how you want to express your art. Like that's you, man. Like you do you, but you have to have some context. For me, you have to have context of like what it is that you're trying to do. So number one thing, make sure that that person's on the same page. And that's extremely obvious by the tune choices. That's why there's a lot of tune choices there. It's extremely obvious by the language that they play, the transcription that they pick, how they play the transcription, and then just what they play when they're improvising. It's very evident if they've never studied improvisation before. And it's not that I'm not willing to teach someone improvisation from the ground up. I am, we do this all the time, but there's only so much room in the studio, and I only have so many lessons I can fit in a week based on the teaching load. So, that's 10 to 12, 10 to 12 people across all levels. So that includes undergrads, graduates, and we have a big studio. And so, 10 to 12 is a lot compared to somewhere like Juilliard, right? So it's important to know that that person wants to learn jazz. So that's number one. Number two is, can you play the trombone? Are you going to fight me about playing the trombone? That's the second one. Like, okay, this person clearly has not practiced their Rochut etudes and can't play the trombone. This is going to be an uphill battle, and sometimes, that's why we also have a classical audition for the undergrads at UNT. There has to be a certain amount of fundamental technique that goes into being a trombone major at UNT, or really at any school. Like, if you don't deal with the instrument, it's doubtful you're going to get into the, whatever is your top school without any trombone technique. Because trombone is hard. And again, we can teach you trombone, but it's got to be there, to get into the studio. Now, that's not to be said that some people have taken lessons, secondary lessons, played in ensembles, and then audition in their second or third year, and then start the jazz degree then, if they don't get accepted, right away. So that's the thing. If you really want to go to a certain school, don't give up. I wanted to go to Juilliard, and so I took an entire year off from school just to prep for the audition, because I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get in here. This is where I want to go. And so, that's sometimes what you got to do. So that's what I'm looking for. Basic fundamentals of trombone. Do you like to play jazz? That's a simple, oversimplified answer probably, and then doesn't go into other considerations, but generally that's it. Brian says, what's a moment in music you realized you needed to up your game? Oh man, all the time. A huge one was going to Argentina the first time. Well, I guess it was the only time, but going to Argentina, 2013, yeah, August of 2013, I think, for Trombonanza. It's a great festival, great artists over the years. Getting there and seeing how many amazing trombone players there were. And I was like, oh crap, I need to get myself together. I was there, I was featured in whatever. I'm young, I'm whatever, I'm doing my thing, just 1 year out of college. And they were gracious enough to allow me to go. And that showed me a lot. You need to get it together. You need to practice the trombone. These guys are playing circles around you. If you want to be in these positions, you want to be featured in a festival, you have to bring your A game all the time, And I think about this sometimes when I think about someone like Wycliffe Gordon. I've seen him play with the best. I've seen him play by himself. I've played with him in just a lesson. And then I've also seen him play with elementary school band or a middle school band. And he sounds great no matter what. And I realized at some point that you do kind of have to turn on the switch, and you're going to say, I'm going to sound great no matter what. And I have to find out what that means for me. How do I play when I'm in a situation where maybe the band isn't as good as it could be, or maybe the band isn't exactly what I want. They're not doing what I want or what I imagined. You just got to turn it on and bring your A game. And I think that sometimes people make excuses. I do. And you just got to decide, like, okay, I need to figure out ways to sound good no matter what, no excuses. And that turned things around for me. I mean, nothing really changed other than I was trying to be more prepared. And it prepared me for a lot of situations in the ensuing 5 years of doing a lot of touring with my own band and not being able to take my band. So I was touring with my music, but not my band. And so getting all different kinds of situations with people with all different kinds of strengths and weaknesses that play all different kinds of music, and maybe not necessarily always like straight ahead jazz is their main thing. So it taught me a lot about just do it. You have to get it together, and you have to make it happen on your own sometimes. So that was a good lesson. But that was the start of that for sure. Haunted Bone, Ray Anderson. Oh yeah, there you go. Ray Anderson's killing. What is my favorite blues head? I like one with the blues leaf. Ornette Coleman. That's a good one. I like. I've been playing a lot. Take the Coltrane for a while. I don't know. I like that one. It's Coltrane Ellington from that record. I like those two. I don't like Sandu. I'll tell you that. I like playing in D flat, so anything in D flat is cool. I like to play SKJ. That's the thing. So there you go. Mr. PC, not one of my favorites, but it's cool. AF cubing is learning it now, and it's difficult to play very fast. Yes, it is difficult to play anything really very fast, but you got to be. If you're going to play it fast, you probably need to play. Meaning multiple tongue. So you got to practice it slow with the multiple tonguing. Practice it slow with the multiple tonguing. Have you ever, Brian says, have you ever been called for a classical gig? Would you take it if you were called for one? Yes. The answer is yes, especially around this time of year. If you don't have an Easter gig in New York around and you're a trombone player, you're doing something wrong. In a non-pandemic world, of course. But yeah, I've played a lot of classical gigs for sure. What's up, Peter? What's up, Jackie? But yeah, I might take it. Maybe not, though. I kind of am in the business of not taking non-artistically fulfilling gigs at the moment. I mean, there's no gigs at the moment, but if it was a classical gig with people that I really wanted to play with, then yeah, of course I would. Or if they needed someone that could like improvise, like Marshall Jilks wrote some quartets that like feature like one player that's more of like a jazz player, and so I would do something like that. I might do like trombone quartet or something like that just to challenge myself, but I don't think they would call me. But if they wanted to call me because they wanted to do something that's kind of a crossover thing, I would definitely do it. But yeah, I've played plenty of classical gigs in the past. Not so much orchestra. My sound in classical music is not like, it's not New York Phil enough. That's just how it is. And I'm okay with that. You have to kind of, at some point, become okay with the things that you're good at and things you're not good at. But, I don't have to play all those gigs, because I also am involved in education, and I also have a label and do consulting and do marketing for artists and social media and advertising and all these kind of things that kind of go in around. So I can focus on playing the gigs that I am suited for and not having to play so much every random classical gig that might come my way. But yes, the short answer is yes. The longer answer you just got. Also from AF Cubing here. What is your favorite style of jazz? Favorite style of jazz? I don't really think about it that way. Maybe eras of jazz. I mean, I play best like modern straight ahead is what you might call it. It's kind of like post-tonal bebop, post-bop. I don't know. Something like that. But I don't know. You can think about it's all the people that I love kind of mashed up into one. Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, Michael Brecker, J.J. Johnson, Curtis Fuller, the Jazz Messengers, the great like bebop stuff from like the Dizzy Gillespie Big Band and Slide Hampton, all that kind of mashed up into one. So it's like built on the tradition of swing and built on the tradition of tunes and improvising, but also kind of with a modern spin. And that's why I like playing with, Lucas Pino so much. He's got that. And I try to do that with my music as well, like my personal music. It's like, yeah, there's modern influences, there's modal stuff, there's non-swinging stuff, but at the same time, it's connected. There is swing on the record, there's a tune, there's stuff that resembles a blues, all that kind of stuff. So that's my favorite style of jazz, if that answers your question. It's a mashup. All right. Yorn, what's up, Yorn? Pino's great. Jazz from Peter Jazzbone. Did you study with Joe Alessi at Juilliard? If so, what was it like? No, he always just wanted to talk about jazz. No lesson for me. And then they wouldn't let us play in the trombone choir at that time. Probably I haven't really talked to him that much, to be honest. We talked about jazz a couple times, but no, no lessons with Joe. I'm too scared, I think, of how bad I would sound. Of how, it's just not my strength. Playing the same thing the same way, or like even playing the same passage, over and over again, they're just not my strengths, I like to play the moment, That's why I play jazz. Yeah. I don't have any good Joe Alessi stories, other than a couple times being on the same flight. But I don't even know if he really knows who I am, to be honest with you, because he's got so many great students, and there's so many great trombonists that go through that Juilliard Jazz program. I don't know that he would even know who I was. So, but that's all good. Like, I don't expect that he would, and he doesn't need to, of course. But Steve Turre and him have some funny stories, or Steve Turre told me some funny stories about the two of them, which I will not air anyone's dirty laundry on Instagram, but it's pretty funny. Maybe I just think they're funny. All right, so I'm going to give one last call here for any additional questions before we wrap up for this week. But we'll be back next week with another edition of our Q&A session. But if you want to go back and check out a couple of things we talked about at the beginning of the video, if you're just joining now, we talked a lot about production strategies at the beginning of this session, talking about organizing and the role of a producer, and I showed some spreadsheets and stuff that I was thinking about. So if you want to go back to the beginning, and then that's a funny question. And then we talked also about the rhythm changes course, and that was pre-launch this week, full launch next week. On the 29th of March, but it's available now. Rhythm Changes Series 1 in the virtual studio. It's a tune-based improvisation concept, kind of going from simple tunes like Cottontail all the way through to Web City, and a variation on rhythm changes, Eternal Triangle, a variation on rhythm changes, and some others. Okay, I see something from Yorn. Of course I have to get to Yorn's question. How do you stick with your recurring content? How do you hold yourself accountable? This is something that I've never had trouble with as just like a person, is like if I decide that I'm going to do something or be committed to something, then I just am. And I've always had this kind of practice of like putting everything off until I have done the thing. And so for a long time in undergrad, that was just practicing. It was like I wouldn't hang out with anyone. I wouldn't talk to anyone. I wouldn't do anything fun until I had practiced. And I guess that, I don't know if it's good or bad. It's probably mostly bad, but it kind of, it pushed me to practice more and get better and all that. But so how do I stick with recurring content? The one is scheduling it into my calendar. Two is, being okay when I want to take a day off or something like that, experimenting, trying different things, and then getting help. So I hire help. That's what I do to stick with the content for sure. So I say, I have a couple editors on the Outside In Music team. If you don't know, Outside In Music is a label, media company. And so we have a couple of people that are good video editors. So then I say, I need clips. I need things to post on Instagram. And then I just stick with it. But when I stopped my first teaching job at Florida State, I said, I'm going to go all in on this internet stuff and launch the virtual studio 2017. And I'm going to work on YouTube. I'm going to figure out how to get onto YouTube and do the things that I'm passionate about and share. And I think that mission has been going on for 4 years or so. And I don't know, I committed to it. And so now I just stick to it. And so the other trick is to batch content. So when I do this, for example, I've got hours and hours and hours of me talking about questions, right? And so then I go to someone and say, hey, can you clip this up for me? Go and find the interesting stuff out of it. Because some of it is me just going, I can't remember, But some of it is just whatever. It's somewhat insightful or interesting, at least. I don't know if it's insightful, but my experience, stories, etc. It just comes out in the course of an hour, giving an hour every week to just talking about stuff. And then some good things come out of it. I got the podcast that comes out every week, the Nick Finzer audio experience. It's a mix of these sessions, these live stream sessions, and videos, music videos, all that different stuff. It's just a mix. But anyway, so I have a team help me, and to keep organized with it, I use a spreadsheet. It's really boring, but we have a spreadsheet that we use for all of our clients, and I just view myself as one of my own clients, and go from there. Just schedule in, all right, on this day I'm going to do this, on this day I'm going to do this. And when I make videos, like I make 4 or 5 videos at a time. That's what I mean by batching. I think I abandoned the batching thing. But I got that from a great book called The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. He talks about batching a lot. He talks about it in terms of email and how it frequently distracts us all the time from actually getting anything done. So batching different kinds of tasks. So right now I'm working on the label, then I'm working on my content, then I'm working on this, and kind of batching it all together and trying to do all of it at the same time. So it's been super, super helpful. So that's how I do it. I don't know. That's just one way, one person's way of doing it. Here's a good question. N says, do you think Steve Turre is mean? Steve Turre is very honest, and he has very little filter. That's what I'll say. He hasn't really been that mean to me, but also if you view it as he's coming at it from a point of he has extreme passion. And when people do stuff that doesn't live up to his expectation, he gets offended a little bit, I think, because they don't love the music maybe as much as he wants them to. And so I think a lot of times it's just a miscommunication. There's a lot of people that might say he's mean, but I don't necessarily think that it's mean. I think he's just very passionate, and he's very passionate about exactly what he's passionate about, very specifically. And if you're not doing those things, then maybe you're not living up to the expectation of what it means to respect the music. And so it feels bigger than just you didn't play that song very well. And so I for me, it's important to put people's thoughts and feelings into context and try to why are they acting that way? Is it because they're actually mean, or they're something's going on? Hey, what's up, WGMC? Jazz Rochester 90.1, the best jazz station. What's happening? That's my hometown jazz station. Always big love. They're joined on Instagram for a second. If you haven't followed them, WGMC Jazz 901 on Instagram. Always doing great stuff. And I know that they're always broadcasting online too. One of the great jazz stations in the country that's mostly jazz programming, which is awesome. And I was very lucky as a young person to grow up. And my first gig ever that was to be an improviser was on Jazz 90.1. I played with a DJ that used to be at the station who now I think lives in Austin maybe, or he did. His name was Eric Telford. He was a trumpet player, and we played music by Herbie Hancock. We played a bunch of the music from Speak Like a Child and some other stuff, and it was my first foray into really playing with grown-up musicians. So I won't forget that. So that was WGMC before they were in their studio where they are now, in a different one. But anyway, so that's Steve Turre. Steve and I have gotten along, but I've seen him and other people butt heads a lot. So I think you just have to have a little bit of empathy when you're interacting with different people and understanding where they're coming from. So that is that. All right. One more question here before I sign off for the day. Have you ever felt any problems with your mouthpiece, or did your first one just happen to be perfect for you? Well, that's kind of like a loaded question, I suppose, because I think that consistency over time leads to good things. So I always go to the idea that it's me. It's not the horn. It's not the mouthpiece. Probably I'm doing something wrong. So I try to own that first and not blame the equipment. So that's number one. Don't blame the equipment for problems that have to do with your deficiencies as a player. If I've exhausted all other like things, all other options, then maybe I'll consider like, oh, maybe the mouthpiece isn't right, or maybe the horn's not right. And so that's why it's taken me so long to switch equipment or to not change. And I don't change mouthpieces very often, if at all. I haven't historically. So it's really important to have that consistency, I think, and give it a chance, because a mouthpiece always feels good for like a minute and then like it feels bad after that. But I have had problems, sure, but most of the time they go away if you just keep practicing. I think that that's how it goes. But I tried a lot of different mouthpieces. The way I landed on the one I have now was because I ordered. So when I was an undergrad, just starting out, thinking that maybe it was the mouthpiece. Maybe it's the mouthpiece. I got to try that. Because I played a Schilke 51D for a long time. And then I was just like, this is too big and heavy. Like, what is going on here? So I just ordered like a crap ton of mouthpieces. And I literally like 15 or 20, because like Musician's Friend or Woodwind Brasswind, one of these websites, they had like a unlimited return policy at one time where you could just send back as much stuff as you ordered. So I would do that, and I would just kind of stick with it. But I landed on the Marcinkiewicz. I actually ended up forgetting to send it back, but then I just stuck with it. And I think it matches well with the sound concept and the players that I like. I mean, Steve Davis, he plays the Marcinkiewicz too, and like I love his sound and approach, even though I don't necessarily maybe sound like him, but I aspire to. So anyway, I just kind of like it kind of stick with it, man. It's probably you. It's not the equipment, you know. Great players can pick up any equipment and sound good. That's my approach. Like, it doesn't matter so much, you know. It may matter 10% this way, 10% that way, but overall, I want to be able to do it all myself, you know. Pick up anything and play and sound good. I've seen Michael Deese do that, Elliot Mason. There's videos of Irby Green and Bill Watrous doing that, just picking up any horn and sounding great. So that's what I aspire to be able to do that. So for me, that means just sticking with one thing, but also just not caring that much, because it's like if you have a vision of what you want to sound like really strongly in your head, then, well, there you go. Kevin says Slide plays Marcinkiewicz as well. Well, there you go. So it's all these people kind of in the wheelhouse of the things that I like, just naturally drawn in that direction, I guess. But yeah, so that's that. If you're interested in trying mine, it's back in stock, so you can check that out. It's in the store. That's the 6ES, so it's a little bit bigger, wider, different cup shape. People say it's shallow, but it's a deceptive. It looks like it's shallow, but it's actually not. It's just the outside cup doesn't look like as deep as like a Schilke 51D, for example, but it is, and the measurements are deceiving, and the shape of the cup is deceiving to the eye. So, you know, just if you want to try it out, it's cool, and no pressure, but feel free you can find it if you want. That's probably the fastest way to get it, because I get them right from the factory and send them, rather than having to wait for a music store to order it, and then maybe they will, maybe they won't, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, wow, it's been a great Q&A today. Really glad to connect with everyone. So thanks for taking the time. Thanks for your questions. We'll be back next Friday. It'll be April 2nd. Wow, March is almost done for that. And I look forward to connecting. So have an amazing week, and we'll catch you all soon.